While her inner self screamed that this was unfair, that the person sitting in front of her didn't deserve it at all, on the outside, she still wore a faint smile and spoke calmly. Once, while guiding an important project, she carefully explained each step. Yet, that nephew didn't pay attention and dropped a sentence that left her speechless. "You're really good, but what's the point? In the end, you're just the one standing behind." Those words hit her like a bucket of cold water. It didn't just insult her, but denied all the effort she had put in over the years. In meetings, when she presented ideas, he would sit beside her, take notes, then repeat exactly what she said, but put his own name on it. The management nodded in approval, while she could only stay silent. Sometimes, she even found out he used materials she worked hard to prepare and submitted them under his name. Instead of being reprimanded, he was praised for being creative. Each day was a continuous mental torment. She felt like a shadow, forced to give her intellect and effort for someone else to reap the rewards. The most painful part was she knew he didn't care about the work at all, just saw it as a stepping stone for his own advancement. The pain at work spilled over into her family life. At night, when the whole family gathered, the conversation revolved around that nephew's achievements. Everyone was proud that someone in the family had succeeded, but no one knew it was built on her sweat and tears. Every compliment for him was like a knife twisting deeper into her heart. One evening, as the family gathered to celebrate the nephew's new step forward, she quietly sat in the corner of the table. She heard their toasts and laughter echoing, but inside she only felt emptiness. Her eyes were red, and her hands clenched the napkin tightly to hold back the trembling. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone the truth, but her throat tightened, and she knew if she spoke up, no one would take her side. The training days dragged on endlessly. Every morning when she woke up, she had to remind herself to be strong enough to face the person she despised most. Every lecture, every piece of guidance, felt like she was cutting away the last bit of pride she had left. By this point, the conflict was no longer just about pity at work or disrespect at home. It had become a clear mental torture. The main character was forced to become the foundation builder for someone who didn't deserve it. That pain wasn't just injustice. It was blatant humiliation. And this build-up created a new knot, a crucial turning point. Inside her, the anger wasn't just simmering anymore. It was turning into a fierce blaze, a fire waiting to erupt, breaking all chains to claim justice for herself. After weeks of trying to hide her inner hurt, the main character began to realize that everything around her was slowly changing. Colleagues who used to greet her with a smile now looked at her with a mix of pity and distance. During lunch at the office, hushed whispers, just loud enough for her to catch, weighed heavily on her heart. She was no longer someone respected, but slowly becoming a fading shadow being replaced. The climax began one late afternoon when she happened to walk past her father-in-law's office. The door was slightly ajar, and in a moment of hesitation, she clearly heard every word. Her father-in-law's voice was steady and firm. He told a close partner, "She's predictable, reliable, and most importantly, there's no other choice but her." At first, she thought it was a compliment, but just seconds later, the true meaning of that phrase hit her. Predictable wasn't praise. It was a cold label. It meant she was never special, never someone to amaze others. She was chosen simply because there was no one else not for her talent or true worth. Her heart shattered. Those words pierced her pride and the long journey of relentless effort she had made. So many late nights at work, so many dinners left unfinished with family, all just to get the job done. How many times she pushed herself to prove she was worthy, and now it all shrinks down to 3 words: predictable. A surge of anger rose up. She stepped back, her hands trembling, having to hold on to the wall to keep her balance. Her mind was a tangled mess of images. Late nights buried in documents, holding back tears from being underestimated, and moments of hope that one day her efforts would be recognized. Now, it all faded away like smoke. In the days that followed, the inner conflict inside her kept escalating. Every pitying look from a colleague felt like a knife twisting deeper into her wound. Her husband's family started to show clear signs of disrespect. At dinner, as she carefully served each dish, someone sarcastically remarked, "Maybe this is the only thing you're good at." It was like tiny drops filling an already overflowing glass. She tried to stay calm, to act like she was okay, but deep down, anger and pain were boiling over. Every night, She lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. In the darkness, she replayed her father-in-law's words like a haunting chorus. Predictable, reliable, no other options. Those words echoed, pounding like a hammer in her head. One evening, passing by the living room, she saw her husband chatting with his father and the relative who had just been brought in as a replacement. They laughed and talked excitedly, discussing new plans. She stood silently at the door, the light from the room casting a pale glow on her face. Her heart clenched when she heard her husband agree. She'll handle the small stuff, and the important things you can hand over to the new person. In that moment, she realized she had been pushed out of the game. No one saw her as the center anymore. No one trusted her completely anymore. The hurt turned into fierce anger, but with it came a quiet determination. She vowed she would never let herself be labeled forever as predictable. The tension wasn't just at work. At home, small conflicts started popping up more frequently. When she tried to speak her mind, people brushed her off with a short dismissal. When she offered to help, they smiled insincerely and said someone else was already taking care of it. She was pushed into a corner, becoming the outsider in her own family. Every day that passed, her emotions were like a rising river, strong and swirling. The mounting disappointment, simmering anger, the pain of being overlooked mixed with a sense of lost trust. She began to wonder, had all her sacrifices never been enough? Was she just a temporary bridge, used only until someone else showed up? One night, while walking alone, the wind blew through her hair, tangled and wild. She stood on a quiet road, tears streaming down, but her eyes burned with fire. She knew this was just the beginning of what was to come. The conflict had reached a point beyond control. A real confrontation was waiting right ahead. In the days following the incident, the main character entered a period full of torment. On the outside, she still kept calm, still smiling when meeting colleagues, still handling everything at home, but deep inside, she felt like someone was squeezing her heart. Every morning she woke up wearing a mask of normalcy, as if nothing had happened, but when her eyes accidentally met the mirror, all she saw was a tired woman, hollow eyes, and a forced smile. At work, she quietly completed every task assigned. Detailed reports, neatly organized plans, all marked with care and dedication. Yet instead of recognition, she only got indifferent reminders. The newcomers, those who got opportunities through connections, were praised like rising stars. She watched that scene with bitterness in her heart. Sometimes, standing in the office, she felt like a ghost, present but unseen. At home, the pretense only made her more exhausted. She sat at dinner, listening to everyone talk about future plans and important projects. She still served food for everyone, still gave a faint smile when casually asked how she was, but inside there was a nameless pain. She wondered why she had to keep enduring, why she had to bury her feelings to keep up a peaceful facade that no one truly cared about. On long nights, when the whole family was asleep, she quietly sat in the dark living room, with only the yellow light shining down on her tightly clenched hands. She remembered every word her father-in-law said, the pitying looks from colleagues, and the fake smiles from relatives. All of it felt like needles constantly piercing her heart. In that moment, she felt trapped in an invisible cage, suffocating, but unable to escape. The more she pretended to be normal, the more exhausted she felt. Every gesture, every word, was like a performance she was forced to put on. Sometimes, she wished she could just break down and cry in the office. Other times, she wanted to scream during family dinners, to tear off the mask of calm she wore. But then, out of pride, and what little dignity she had left, she stayed silent. That silence, day after day, became an unbearable burden. She started thinking a lot about giving up. At first, those were just fleeting thoughts that crept in when she was utterly exhausted. But over time, those thoughts slowly turned into a quietly burning fire. She imagined a day when she would walk away from it all, leaving behind the contemptuous looks, the cruel words, and the pretending that had killed her spirit. One day, while cleaning up papers in the office, she accidentally found an old photo. It was a picture taken on her first day at work, her eyes full of hope, her smile bright. She held the photo in her hands for a long time. Her heart suddenly ached. The woman in the photo was her, but not really her anymore. She realized that over the years, because of sacrifice, dedication, and the desire to prove herself, she had lost who she was. The biggest torment wasn't being replaced, but letting others decide her worth. She had allowed prejudices, family relationships, and both careless and deliberate words to shape how she saw herself. That realization was like a ringing alarm, painful yet awakening. From that moment on, the thought of giving up was no longer vague. It gradually became a clear plan. She started thinking about where she would go, what she would do, and most importantly, how she would live without having to pretend anymore. Though the thought scared her, it also brought a rare sense of freedom, like a faint light in deep darkness. She understood that if she kept living in pretense, kept enduring, she would lose her very soul. And nothing was more valuable than living honestly, being herself, walking the path she chose. Inside her, the pain was still there, but mixed with a fresh determination. She knew that one day soon, she would make the final decision, one that would change her life. The climax of her torment had now turned into a turning point, opening the door to a new journey. The meeting room that afternoon felt oppressively stifling. Outside, the sky was filled with gray clouds, light filtering through the foggy window pane, casting shadows over the long wooden table. The swivel chairs were neatly arranged, papers scattered after the morning strategy presentation. The atmosphere after the project's end seemed calm, but inside her, a storm was raging. She stepped in, clutching a white envelope tightly in her hand. No one knew what was inside, but her steps were heavy and decisive. Her heart raced, yet her eyes were eerily calm. For years, she had lived in silence, endured, and let others decide, but today was different. The man sitting at the head of the table, her father-in-law and direct boss, looked up from a stack of reports. He looked tired, age marked his face, but his eyes still held that familiar pride. He said, "You want to discuss the nephew's training plan again? I'm very busy." His voice was dry and impatient. She didn't answer right away. She placed the envelope on the table and gently pushed it toward him. "This is my resignation letter." The room suddenly fell silent. The ticking of the wall clock sounded clearly. A colleague passing by the hallway glanced in, stopped at the scene, then quietly walked away. He stared wide-eyed, barely believing it. He picked up the envelope, trembling as he tore it open, reading the clear, firm words. His face flushed red, then turned pale. You can't do this. You're the project's pillar. If I leave, everything will collapse. You know that." His voice trembled, completely different from his usual authoritative tone. She looked straight ahead, her eyes shimmering but determined. "Dad, this isn't about a position, a project, or money anymore. This is about respect. I've worked nonstop, sacrificed every evening, every weekend, even missed important family moments. But in the end, every opportunity goes to someone undeserving, just because they're family." He was speechless, stammering, "But it's tradition in our family. I just want to keep this business in the family's hands. You still have a position and a good salary, so why be so extreme?" She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her skin, took a deep breath and said clearly, "This is not about promotion. This is about respect." The room shook from those words. Even he had to lift his head, stunned. She had never dared to raise her voice like that before. Never used such fiery eyes to stare straight at the power that had held her back for so long. He forced a smile, his tone softer. "Honey, you misunderstand. I cherish you like my daughter. I appreciate your efforts." "You! Dad cherishes me?" She cut in sharply, bitterly. "If you did, you wouldn't let colleagues look at me with pity. If you did, you wouldn't make me teach every single skill to someone who hasn't tried at all, just because he shares your last name. You cherish me so much you turn me into a lifelong shadow?" He choked on his words, his veiny hands trembling as they lightly hit the table. His eyes flickered from anger to helplessness, then fear. At that moment, the door swung open. Some family members had just arrived, intending to join the meeting. They witnessed the daughter-in-law, usually gentle and obedient, now standing tall, speaking clearly as if unleashing years of pent-up strength. The nephew, who had been favored with the opportunity, stood frozen in the corner. He looked confused, head down. No one expected the silence all these years to explode into such a fierce fire. "I'm sorry, but I can't keep going like this." She continues, her voice trembling but steady. "I need to find a place where I'm truly valued for who I am. A place where my sweat and tears aren't taken for granted." Her father-in-law, the boss, rushes over, placing his hand on her shoulder, panic in his voice. "Please don't leave. You're the only one holding this company together. I was wrong. I can reconsider. I can—" She gently removes his hand. "You're just afraid of losing someone to do your work. I'm not afraid of losing you. Losing the feelings. Losing the trust. That's the difference." Those words cut the last thread of connection like a knife. He staggers, eyes red, trying to hide it but failing. She stands up, gathers her documents, her gaze sweeping across everyone. No longer trembling, no longer bowing her head. Only a calm strength remains. "I'm leaving," she says softly, but clearly, her voice filling the room. "Not because I hate this family, but because I need to love myself." She walks away decisively. The door closes behind her, leaving whispers, sighs, and stunned looks. That confrontation wasn't just an argument. It was a turning point, the first time the main character chose herself, instead of accepting to be belittled, and the first time everyone in the family and company had to face the truth. Her strength wasn't in her title, but in her self-respect. News of her leaving the company spread faster than any project or contract before. Within days, emails and calls from other companies started pouring in. What surprised her most was that many major recruiters had been quietly watching her progress and work results for years. To them, her departure from the old company was a golden opportunity they couldn't miss. One morning, just as she set her coffee cup down on the kitchen table of her small apartment, her phone rang. A professional voice said, "This is Northfield Corporation. We know about your leadership skills, and we would like to invite you to be the CEO of our strategic project." Not only was the salary twice as high, but more importantly, they trusted her and wanted her to lead their new team. Her heart tightened. The years of endurance, the times she was forgotten, the meetings where her voice echoed into empty space, all of it suddenly became the foundation proving her worth today. She didn't answer right away, but when she put down the phone, her eyes lit up with a new hope. Meanwhile, her old company began to falter. Reports were late, contracts were lost, and especially, the important project she once handled stalled because the favored nephew lacked the ability to lead. Employees whispered, shareholders lost faith, and her father-in-law, the once powerful boss, began to feel his position shake. He couldn't control the situation, missing the one person who had always kept everything in hand. At her new office, she walked in under the warm gaze of her coworkers. No more contempt, no more mocking whispers behind her back. Instead, there was a sincere welcome. The HR manager took her hand tightly, saying they had followed the project she led for years and admired how she steered through every challenge. They saw her arrival as the key to solving the current crisis. On her first day, standing before the new team, dozens of eyes watched her with expectation. She took a deep breath and began her speech. "I have worked in a place where loyalty wasn't rewarded. I used to think silence and hard work would bring recognition, but I was wrong. Here, I want to build an environment where everyone is heard, appreciated, and recognized for their own efforts." The whole room erupted in applause. In that moment, she felt her true strength. Not the strength of endurance, but the strength of choice. While she was settling into her new job, news of the crisis at her old company appeared on financial news. Investors started pulling out their funds. Those who once supported the old boss, her father-in-law, now turned their backs. They whispered among themselves that the company had lost its greatest asset, not money, not contracts, but the talent they once looked down on. Once, as she was walking down the wide hallway of the new building, her phone buzzed again. This time it was her father-in-law calling. His voice was hoarse. "My dear, I'm sorry. Everything is falling apart. I was wrong. Can you come back?" She closed her eyes, feeling a sharp pang in her heart. A part of her had once longed to hear those words, but now they didn't carry the same weight. She replied calmly, "Dad, thank you. But I've found where I belong, where I'm respected, and I can't go back to being just a shadow." Silence came from the other end. Only heavy breathing remained. Then the call ended. From that moment, the contrast became clear. On one side was the new company thriving under her leadership, with projects succeeding one after another, colleagues united, and trust restored. On the other side was the old company sinking into chaos, internal divisions growing, and an aging boss increasingly isolated in his own empire. This unexpected twist wasn't just a career turning point, but proof of a truth. When one door closes, another opens bigger, brighter, and more deserving for those who dare to stand up for their own worth. She had cried in silence, endured in humiliation. But today, she walks forward with pride. She understands that respect isn't something others give you, but something you claim for yourself. And that's the moment when the audience, following this story, sees themselves in it. Everyone has been looked down on, ignored, and hoped one day to be truly recognized. The story completely turned around. From someone overlooked, she became sought after. From a struggling company, she stepped into an environment full of opportunities. And above all, from a resigned person, she became a symbol of pride and self-respect. In the days that followed, things gradually got worse for the old company. At first, it was just rumors about major clients losing trust. But then the rumors turned into reality. One morning, economic newspapers reported that Wallace Group, the most important partner, officially ended the long-term contract. They gave a simple but powerful reason. The project quality was no longer guaranteed as before. In the old office, the atmosphere was heavy, like a dark cloud hanging over. Employees used to working in a stable environment now sat anxiously, whispering to each other about layoffs. Everyone knew that when a major client leaves, a chain reaction of contract losses follows. A week later, an official announcement was sent via internal email. The company had to cut staff, with numbers reaching into the hundreds. Colleagues who once laughed at her and looked down on her now wore gloomy faces. Some even cried at their desks. They never expected that day to come so soon. The nephew, who was once supported by his father-in-law, now sits dazed in the meeting room, unable to look anyone in the eye. He knows this failure clearly bears his name. He's not capable, yet was given power just because of blood ties. Meanwhile, the father-in-law, once powerful and confident, is now quieter than ever. He faces an angry board of directors and shareholders who bombard him with questions. They ask why he pushed out talented people, why he put his trust in the wrong place. Each question feels like a dagger piercing his already shaken pride. He has no words left to defend himself. She, from afar, hears the news and feels her heart sink. Even though she left the company and found a better path, her heart still aches. That place was once a part of her life. It was where she spent her youth, believing hard work would be rewarded. She's saddened by the many innocent colleagues losing their jobs, saddened to see an empire that was once solid now crumbling. But deep down she knows this is the inevitable result of favoritism and injustice. When justice is distorted and talent goes unrecognized, collapse is only a matter of time. One evening, she sits in her quiet apartment, watching the city lights outside the window. In her mind flashes the scene of her father-in-law bowing, begging her to come back. The scene of employees bursting into tears when handed their termination papers. The scene of contracts being torn up. She sighs, eyes welling with tears. She's not happy to see them fail, but she can't save anything now. She did her part while she was there. Leaving wasn't about revenge, but about protecting her own dignity. The next day, news broke that the company lost yet another major client. Stocks plummeted. The media used harsh words like crisis and collapse. Some reporters even directly blamed leadership for ignoring talent and favoring family ties. Her name never appeared publicly, but everyone understood implicitly. At the new company, when coworkers shared about the chaos at the old company, she just gave a faint smile. Part of her wanted to let it all go, but another part still felt unsettled. She knew well that among those suffering the consequences, many had fought alongside her day and night on big projects. They weren't at fault, yet they had to bear the burden of poor decisions from the higher-ups. One afternoon, she received a message from an old colleague. He wrote briefly, "If only they had listened to you back then. Now it's too late." Reading those words, tears fell from her eyes. Not from regret, but from sorrow. She knew life always has its own way of being fair. When favoritism blinds reason, and people disregard the value of fairness and true effort, the price to pay won't be small. The old company was a vivid example of that. They lost clients, lost trust, and ultimately lost the foundation they once took pride in. For her, this was also a big lesson, not just for herself, but for anyone watching this story. That sometimes injustice can last long, but it can never last forever. That one wrong decision can push an entire team into the abyss. And that respect, once lost, can't be bought back with money or power. As she closed this chapter, she sat in front of the mirror, looking at herself. She saw a woman who had grown, who had endured pain, and who was now strong enough to face the truth without breaking. She knew everything happened for a reason, and sometimes the collapse of an old place clears the way for a new journey. On her first day at the new company, the main character walked into the office feeling both nervous and excited. There were no longer probing looks or half smiles like before. Instead, there were friendly handshakes and warm greetings from new colleagues. She immediately felt the difference. No one cared where she came from or who she knew. Everyone only looked at her skills and attitude. That warmed her heart, because for the first time after many years of dedication, she was truly welcomed. The job wasn't easy at first. The new position demanded a lot of responsibility, back-to-back meetings, and complex projects with major clients. Sometimes she felt so overwhelmed she wanted to give up. But every time she thought back to her days at the old company, where she was looked down on and denied opportunities, she stood up stronger. She knew this was the moment to prove her true worth. The team under her quickly noticed the difference she brought. She wasn't the kind of leader who just gave orders. She was someone ready to listen and share in the team's struggles. When an employee made a mistake, she didn't yell. Instead, she would sit down to explain and guide them on how to do better. When someone achieved something, she praised them openly, encouraging their confidence. Gradually, the team atmosphere became more connected. Everyone gave their best because they felt valued. She remembered the days when she had to force herself to teach someone undeserving, when she was pushed to be just a shadow for others to shine. Now, she was no one's shadow anymore. She stood on stage by herself, spoke for herself, and shined on her own. Every time she completed a project, it reinforced her belief that she truly deserved this position. Beyond work, her personal life also changed for the better. Her little family no longer had to watch her come home tired and frustrated. Instead, there were joyful dinners, laughter echoing in the living room, and weekends spent together at the park. Her children looked at her with admiration, and her husband held her hand tightly, saying he was proud she dared to walk her own path. One morning, while looking in the mirror before work, she paused for a long moment. The woman in the mirror was no longer the one who bowed her head, silent and enduring. Instead, it was a confident face, bright eyes, and straight shoulders. She smiled, a smile she hadn't recognized on herself in a long time. She began writing in her journal again, a habit she had long forgotten. On each page, she recorded what she had been through from pain and humiliation to the moment she stood up and reclaimed her dignity. She wrote to remember, to remind herself that life may take many things away, but it can't take away pride unless you let it. An important day arrived, and she was chosen to present the project to the leadership and key clients. The whole team was nervous, but she stayed calm. Stepping onto the stage with the spotlight shining on her, she felt the whole room fall silent, waiting. Her voice rang out clearly, every word confident, every glance radiating self-assurance. When she finished, the whole audience stood up and applauded. The director shook her hand and said, "We're lucky to have you on the team." Just that one sentence erased years of past bitterness. She also learned a profound lesson about forgiveness. She understood that holding on to resentment only weighs you down more. She didn't forget the injustices she'd faced, but chose to let go in order to live peacefully. Whenever she thought about her old company, about those who once looked down on her, she no longer felt anger, just pity for them not recognizing the value of a person. Sometimes, a few former colleagues would reach out, sharing their struggles at the old company. She didn't feel satisfaction or mockery, only advised them to believe in themselves and find their own path, because she had walked that path and knew that sometimes loss is the chance to start a new journey. As time passed, She became a role model for many, not because of a high position or an attractive salary, but because of her resilience and ability to overcome adversity. Many young colleagues looked up to her for inspiration, to believe that even if you're underestimated, you can rise if you stay determined and never give up. In a team meeting, while discussing future directions, she shared, "The most important thing isn't what others think of you, but what you think of yourself. If you believe you deserve it, keep moving forward, and one day the world will have to recognize it." Those words echoed in many minds and became her new life's declaration. At night, sitting alone by the window, looking at the distant city lights, she felt truly at peace inside. All the pain and resentment from the past are now just memories. What remains is the strength it brought, the growth, and the unshakable belief in her own worth. She closed her diary with a simple line, "I have found myself again." From that moment, she knew that no matter how many challenges life threw at her, she would never lose her self-respect and faith. After all the upheavals, the tears, and the quiet endurance, the main character realized a very important truth. She once believed that loyalty and sacrifice would earn recognition. But in the end, all she got was disrespect. And from that pain, she learned a deep lesson. Loyalty without respect is just slavery. This isn't to deny the value of loyalty, but to remind that loyalty only matters when it's paired with mutual respect. When someone works and gives their all without being appreciated, that loyalty unintentionally becomes a chain. It traps a person in a vicious cycle of sacrifice and hurt. She had been like that once, thinking that if she stayed silent and endured, one day people would recognize her worth. But the harsh truth is, if you let others disrespect you once, they'll keep doing it forever. The amazing thing is, she found the courage to break free from that invisible cage, and once she did, she felt true freedom and truly recognized her own value. At that moment, she realized a second, even more powerful lesson. The sweetest revenge is becoming the person you were meant to be. No need to shout or prove anything to those who once looked down on you. Your own transformation is the clearest answer. When she stood strong at her new company, when her colleagues respected her, when she shined through her skills and character, that was undeniable proof that they were wrong. And that's the most beautiful revenge. Not through hatred, but through success and confidence. Her story isn't just a personal journey. It's a message for anyone going through something similar. Maybe you're working somewhere your efforts go unnoticed. Maybe you're in a relationship where your sacrifices are only seen as obligations. Maybe you're convincing yourself that staying silent and patient will eventually change everything. But the truth is, if you don't stand up and reclaim your respect, no miracle will happen. She wants to tell the audience that everyone has their own value and deserves respect. Never let blind loyalty turn you into a slave. Don't let unreciprocated sacrifice make you lose yourself. Remember, you don't need to prove anything to everyone, just to yourself, that you're worthy. And now, looking back on her journey, the main character just wants to ask one thing. If it were you, would you choose to endure or walk away? This question isn't just for her story, but for everyone watching. If you choose to endure, ask yourself, what are you enduring for, and are you receiving the respect you deserve? If you choose to leave, believe that there are always other doors open for you, places ready to appreciate you for who you are. In life, sometimes we fear change because we think we'll lose safety. But in reality, that safety is just an illusion if it's not accompanied by respect. The main character took many years to realize this, but in the end, she found herself again. And she hopes that through this story, you'll take something meaningful for yourself. Remember, loyalty only matters when you're respected. The best revenge isn't making others suffer, but rising up to become the best version of yourself. And the last question she wants to leave with you is, if you were in that situation, would you stay silent and endure, or would you bravely stand up and walk away? Today's story has come to an end, but its emotional echo surely remains in each heart. If you've stayed with us until this moment, we sincerely thank you. Every view, every comment, and every share from you is the motivation for us to keep telling stories that touch the heart. The Crying Inside channel isn't just a place to hear sad stories or family pain. This is also a place where we can find empathy together, to realize that even though each of us has our own journey, we all long to be loved and respected. If you found today's story meaningful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any new videos. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts and feelings, because your comments help the story not just end here, but continue to spread and touch many other hearts. Once again, thank you for being with us. Remember, family can hurt you, but it can also be the place that heals you. See you in the next video, where we'll embark together on a new journey of tears, smiles, and deep lessons.